Hi, this is Dave and welcome to the Table, a series of videos where I review and discuss various board and card games, looking at them from a family perspective. Today we're going to be taking a look at Freedom, the Underground Railroad from Academy Games. This is a 1 to 4 player cooperative game where you work as agents in the Underground Railroad, helping to assist slaves move from the South to freedom in the North and Canada. Let's take a look at this game and how it's played, and I'll come back and I'll give you my thoughts. Okay, let's take a look at the components that come in Freedom, the Underground Railroad. And what I've done is I already have the game set up because there is quite a bit to getting the game ready to play. So inside the box you're going to have this beautiful game board here that's divided up into two sections. Number one is the playing map here, which is where the action is going to take place in trying to move the slaves up to freedom in Canada. And the other side, it looks almost like a newspaper, and what it is keeps track of the time periods in which the game takes place. For example, the first period is 1800 to 1839, then 1840 to 1859, and then finally 1860 to 1865. And I'm going to start over, and then the game will come with some components that come out here. There will be some support tokens that come in, and there's a whole bunch more that are required for more than one player. And then there are these conductor tokens, which are in this row right here, and the conductor tokens are used, they're purchased, and they're used in order to move the slaves and working their way towards freedom in Canada. And finally, there's some fundraising tokens that are there, and those are going to be used and redeemed in order to generate support and generate money. In the back of the board, there's a big pile of money that comes with the game. There's $1, $5, and $10 tokens. And then there is this stack of abolitionist cards that come in, and they're divided up into the 3 time periods. And then within those time periods, there are specific types of cards that are in there, and I'm going to focus in on here so you can see what the types they are. First of all, this type right here with the tan background is considered a general abolitionist card, and so that can be, it's kind of a one-time use card. The second is, these are opposition cards here, and they usually have a negative effect, and they cause some sort of penalty for the game until they are either purchased to be removed or they have to work their way off the board. And then finally, this one over here is called a reserve card, and a reserve card can be used, and that benefit can be used along with your normal character. Speaking of normal character, we will have, there's a bunch of different types of characters that come in the game. For example, here, I am the station master, and there is a nice order of play here. You can see here, this is where the reserve card would go if it's purchased, and then they also have a character card. For example, right here, with the station master, during the action phase, she's going to get $1, and then she will be able to move one slave catcher 1 less space during the action phase. And then also it says during another player's action phase, conductor tokens don't move any of the slave catchers. That's like a one-time use thing, and if she does that, then she would flip her card over, and she will have a separate benefit when she's done that. Well, she would actually get $2 during the action phase, and she'd still be able to move 1 less slave catcher, 1 less space during the action phase. So she does have kind of a benefit, so we have that. Also on the game board, you will look here, there's a bunch of wooden cubes that represent the slaves, and off to the side we have a bunch of slave market cards, and these get revealed at the end of each turn. There'll be another one off. These slaves will move out onto the plantations, and so we only have a specific amount of time before this deck runs out, and that can trigger the end of the game. Up at the top we have a card that is player variable, and this will give you the requirements. For example, here for 1 player we have to free 5 slaves, and we can only lose 12. And this has got a varying difficulty adjustment, so this is for a normal game. If you want it more difficult, you'll have to free 7 slaves, and you can only lose 8. So there is some variability and difficulty for this game. And then finally on the board we have these slave catcher tokens that they start off in various cities and they're marked where they are. These are the nice wooden markers that you can get with the game if you order it now. Otherwise, what will happen is they just come as cardboard chits and they will get moved, they will get placed on the board here. So these are kind of a nice little they're a nice little touch to the game. And then finally there's two dice that are right here, and these have varying colors that will, and these little arrows that will tell you how the slave catchers will move during one of their phases. So those are all the components for the game. I've got it set up, and let me show you how the game is played. Okay, so I've got the game set up here for a solitaire version of the game, and a couple things that I want to note. Number one, what the requirements are in order to win. We have to free 5 slaves, and we also have to purchase these 3 support tokens up on the left hand side of the board. So there's 2 requirements in order to win this game. It's a very difficult game. So, and then a couple things that will trigger the end of the game would be if we lose too many slaves here. If we lose 12 slaves, the game is over. Or and we only have a certain number of turns too in order to achieve all of this, and that is controlled by the slave market deck here. At the end of each turn, there's going to be, slaves are going to come off the market onto the plantation, so they're going to be constantly moving through. So we have to work here. There are 5 phases to the game. So at the beginning of your turn, the first thing you're going to do is what's called the slave catcher phase, and we will roll these 2 dice, and we will be able to determine if these slaves are going to move. For example, here this says that the brown slave catcher is going to move one direction towards the black, which is going to be here. He's going to move from New York. He's going to follow along this brown path, and he's going to move up to Boston. So that's his phase. He can move up to 2 spaces, and then these arrows will or even up to 3 spaces, and they will determine which direction they're going to move. If they come up with the black arrows, they're going to move to the east, and if they come up with the white arrows, they're going to move to the west. On the other token here, if we come up with the slave guy here, this means that the slave catchers do not move. Otherwise, the other sides all represent one of the different types of catchers. So that's the slave catcher phase. Now will come the planning phase. And during the planning phase, we'll be able to come over, and I start off with a big whopping $8 to spend. So I have to kind of use my money wisely. There's a lot of planning here and what you need to do. And right now there is this effect here that says support tokens cost $1 more to purchase. So right now it's going to cost me $11 to buy one, and I don't. So during my planning phase, I'm going to grab one of these chips right here. This is going to be a conductor token, and I will be able to move 3 slaves 1 space. So I will pay my $2 to the bank. And I could take another cube if I want to, but I'm not going to at this point. So that takes care of my planning phase. Now during my action phase, which is the next phase, a few things will happen. Number one, on my character card says I will gain $1 during the action phase. So I receive $1 automatically. Now if I want to, I can purchase some cards from over on the side here and put them into effect. And there's a couple different things here that will give me different benefits, but right now, for the sake of time, I'm not going to purchase one of those cards. I'm going to use one of these tokens right here to move 3 slaves 1 space. And I can do this a bunch of different ways, but I have to move them off the plantation because I'm going to have more slaves coming in at the end of the turn, so I have to have enough room here. So I will take 1 slave and I will move him here, 1 there. I will move 1 up to here, and I will take 1 up and I will move it over here. And I will do that. Now, a note here that you can only have 1 slave on one of these spaces at a time, except for the major cities, which are up at the top here, these big ones like Chicago and New York, Washington, D.C., and Boston, and those we can have multiple slaves on there. So that was my action phase. This token, now that I've used it, this 3-for-1, this goes out of play and won't be able to get that back again. So once I've completed the action phase, I will go on to what they call the slave market phase, and what will happen is now this particular card here, these 5 slaves are going to come off the market and they're going to be going on the different plantations and filling up spaces. So it was a good thing that I moved some off, because look, I already have 3 coming in here and 1 there and 1 back here. So now I'm full. This card will then become discarded. This one will come down. This one here will come up. And this one is revealed. And then I will place 6 more slave tokens on the board. So as you can see, there's a lot of things that are going on here, and we are kind of pressed for time to move all of these slaves off, because once we go through this whole deck and we lose too many slaves, the game is going to be over. And then finally, what we will do is what they call the lantern phase. And usually if there's more than 1 player, there's a lantern token that will be passed around to signify who the first player is. Here's the lantern token right here. Since I am a single player, it stays with me all the time. But during the lantern phase, what I will do is now it's time to refresh these cards in the abolitionist queue. So for 1 and 2 players, both of these cards will come off and they will be discarded. These cards now slide down, and the next 2 cards will be revealed. And this is going to go on for a number of turns, and eventually what you're going to be doing is you will be able to move these slaves up and try to get them to freedom. Now, one thing I do want to show you is when you move up into a space, like for example, if this slave moved here, it's along this purple track, and so this purple slave catcher will move 1 space towards you because he landed there and he's kind of got a tip that you're there. So we have to be really careful and how you're moving, because as we cross certain paths, like this one here, when it moved, this one from Chicago will move down here. So these slave catchers are going to move around. So you're going to have to strategically figure out how you're going to move, use some of your abilities to prevent the slave catchers from moving around, or making the tough decision of, I will move this one over here and let it be captured in order to open up a path for more to move to freedom. When a slave is captured, it will just get moved back over to the slave market card, and the next turn it's going to be going back on the plantation. So this game, again, you're going to be moving through. Once we start going up into the northern states, you will start gaining support money. You'll have that money coming in to help you because they are supportive of this whole Underground Railroad movement. So this is just an overview of how to play the game, but essentially on each of your turns you're going to have those particular phases where you're going to be trying to generate support. If you use a fundraising token, over here you would redeem one and it will tell you how much money that you will gain. For example, here you will gain like $1 for each, this one here I'll show you, you will gain for each cube that in the green, which are the southern states, for each slave that's on one of those green spaces, you'll receive money. You'll get $1 for each of those spaces. So if you have a bunch of slaves out here, it's a good time to use your fundraising token because you would be able to redeem that for quite a bit of money. With multiple players, this is a cooperative type game, so you're going to have to work together in order to do that. So there's some discussion involved. Anyway, so this is how you play Freedom, the Underground Railroad. Okay, let's talk about Freedom, the Underground Railroad from Academy Games, and I'll say up front, I love this game. This is the best cooperative game I have ever played, and perhaps one of the best games that I have ever played. This game is so rich in history, and it just all of the elements put together make this an outstanding game. Let me start off with the artwork. think the artwork with this game is fantastic. If you look at the board, it's beautiful. I love how it's divided up between your map of where all the action is taking place, and then over on the side it looks almost like a newspaper. In the setting, it kind of looks like it's set up on a table somewhere where you're kind of in secrecy trying to work to move these slaves to freedom. So I believe that really adds to that element to the game. Now, another thing that I like is the component quality. We have the wooden cubes that are on there. That makes it really, really nice. I really like the 3D wooden slave catcher tokens. So those are really, really nice. So I would encourage you, if you've seen this video closer to when it's released, to order a copy and get some while they still have them. Otherwise, you will end up with just the little cardboard chits, which are adequate enough, but they think that the three-dimensional tokens kind of give the game just a little bit of a richer feel. Another thing that I like about this game is the adjustable difficulty, and the game scales in terms of the number of players. So depending on the more players that are involved, there's different requirements for the number of slaves that have to be freed. There are the cards for the slave market are different, so there will be more of them coming on the market, and then also there will be more of the support tokens that have to be purchased and more of the conductor tokens and fundraising tokens that are available, and there are some additional cards that will be available for 3 and 4 players that will be in the abolitionist deck. So the game does have variability in gameplay to scale it for the number of players, and then also the fact that you do have the game can be played in normal mode, and then there's a more difficult mode. So if you think you've got the game mastered, you can play that. Now, I've played this game a bunch of times and I haven't even come close to winning the game even in normal mode. So I know that this game definitely will have a lot of replayability because it's very, very challenging. Now, again, with this game, I want to talk about the historical aspect, and I want to talk about this from a family perspective too. This game brings to light history. Now, during the slavery era of our nation is not exactly a proud moment in our nation's history, but it's something that we still have to accept, and we can't just ignore it and move on. We have to acknowledge that this was a period in our history, and this game does a beautiful job of bringing it to light and also focusing on one of the more positive things during slavery, and that was the movement of people that were trying to bring about an end to it. So this whole Underground Railroad movement, it does a good job of bringing that to light, and there's a lot of different places and people that are mentioned in the game that you may not necessarily remember from your history class. So it's reliving history. So from a family perspective, this game is an awesome supplement for U.S. history, and this game I think should be in every household. But I do say that this game, I wouldn't take it lower than junior high in terms of, I wouldn't try to have little kids play it because it's too difficult and they're not going to really understand a lot of what's going on. High school, absolutely, this game would be perfect for juniors in high school to play because that's when they take U.S. history, and so this is a great supplement for that, especially during that era of time. Another thing from the family perspective is this game definitely comes up with a lot of decision-making skills and resource management. So you're going to have to, during your planning, you're going to have to be able to determine how you're going to spend the money that you have. Are you going to buy support tokens? Are you going to buy conductor tokens? Are you going to pay for abolitionist cards? Then also, how are you going to move your slaves around? Are you going to move them to draw attention to the slave catchers, to have them move towards him and open up a path for more slaves to move through? Or are you going to strategically try to get them on spaces to use a fundraising token, for, like another player use a fundraising token? Or are you going to try to get them in specific cities in order to generate money? So there's a lot of planning that way. The other thing about this game is that it is cooperative, so you have to work together. In this game, if you do not discuss and plan properly and kind of use everybody's roles to their best ability and discuss with each other how you're going to do things and what you're going to do, you will not be successful with this game. So it really, really, really stresses the importance of it being cooperative. Now again, if you look at the Underground Railroad movement, it was not one person. It was a whole network of people that all had to work together. So again, this game just really ties that together. I can't say enough about this game. I think when I did my gameplay demonstration, it doesn't do the game justice. I had to kind of cut it short just for the sake of time, because otherwise this video would go on forever trying to explain the game, and you should experience it for yourself. So again, I can't say enough about this game. I want to encourage you to pick up a copy today. Again, this is Freedom, the Underground Railroad by Academy Games, and pick it up, add it to your library, and you take a chance to relive history. Okay, that's it for now, and join me again next time as we look at another game and see how it makes it to the table.